Our special guest for this month's T-Minus webinar is Jim Holmes. Jim is one half of a production team with his brother Rob, and they go under the name of Boe Weaver. Boe Weaver specialise in production, mixing and songwriting, and are based in the UK on the Isle of Wight. They have worked with an array of talented artists, including Rhys Lewis, Wolf People, the Archie Bronson Outfit, the 77 78s, Whyte Horses, Pete Molinari, Tom Jones, Swan, Levitt, and Jalen and Ghonda. And lastly, Jim and his brother Rob and band were signed to the Island Records label under the name of Jackson Analog, Jim. Alongside their production work, Boe Weaver have made several albums as artists and continue to write both for Sync and Library. Alongside their production work, what I was going to say actually, and I wanted to mention it, is that you've been working with the EMI KPM library in particular, actually, which is very prestigious. And I know that I was very lucky to work with you on one of your projects, and I absolutely loved it. Alongside Jim is obviously a very talented brother, Rob, and Jim also is an extraordinarily gifted and talented artist in his own right. Jim has tinnitus and hearing issues, like many of us in the music industry, and has managed to adapt, attenuate, and maneuver himself around these obstacles and find a very unique path through this tinnitus maze. Before we start, published studies vary a bit, but general consensus is that somewhere between 30 and 50% of musicians have experienced some form of tinnitus. Welcome, Jim.
Hey, Rupert.
Please, can you tell the community a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I'm Jim Holmes. As Rupert said, I'm a musician predominantly, I would say, that then accidentally became a producer. I've done music for maybe 25 years now. I've done production for maybe 15 of those years, I would say. I work in our own little studio down on the Isle of Wight. We do an array of things, but mostly I would say guitar music. That's fair to say. We don't do kind of dance music and things like that. We've carved out a nice little niche for ourselves, and we're happy down here. It works for us. The people that we work with like to come here, and it's just been a good, solid life so far, musical life at least.
Fantastic, Jim. And may I also say that you're a very close, very dear friend of mine as well, and it's an absolute privilege to have you here. Thanks so much. Now,
pleasure.
The reason I've got you on here is really one aspect, which is your tinnitus and the way that you are able to deal with it so successfully. Now, you might have a different take on that, but the way I see you deal with this condition is extraordinary. I don't know anybody like you. I know that you have talked to me about it, because obviously I have concerns about my own tinnitus and other people's, but I'm shocked at how well you managed to get around the issue of tinnitus affecting not only your musical life, but your life. So in a sense, could you tell me how you kind of first noticed that you're experiencing the condition of tinnitus?
Well, see, the thing is, it's not any one thing. It's a series of unfortunate events, really, if I had to look at it. And it has to go back a bit before tinnitus, really. So yeah. I was in a band. We did a lot of touring, a lot of live gigs. And we were lucky enough that actually, before we became the band, a local college, which you know, Platform One, did this. They did IEMs, in-ear monitor moldings, really early on. So before we were even out and doing gigs, we had decent protection for our ears. And for the years that we did it, I managed to escape any kind of damage to my ears, which is incredible, really. You know, all of the, you know, the big gigs, the small gigs, the tiny little, like we were just talking about, 100 club type gigs where it's really brash. I managed to get away with it and come out with, you know, the occasional ringing ear, but nothing that was a problem. And then we started to do production. And the first time I ever had any trouble at all, we had an isolation booth. So an isolation booth, for someone that doesn't know, is like a box you would put a loud amplifier in, and it allows you to make lots of noise and kind of get it away from all of the other mic sources. And it was a local band, a chap called Al Bevington, who won't be watching, but I'll make sure he sees it, had his very loud punk amp in there, and it was meant to be off. and I was in there changing a setting or something like that. So I went inside the box, and I went in kind of sideways. And as I went in the box, he let out an almighty chord that I must have been 10, 20 centimeters at the most away from the speaker. And it was instantly painful. And I instantly knew that something was wrong, was really bad. And so the fallout from that is that my right ear became lowered. It became damaged in quite a way. And it would be noticeable, but manageable. And it was all right. I could deal with it. And then if I was ever around a loud music source, so let's say I went to a festival, if I was around something like that, I would really notice it attenuate down for days afterwards. And I thought it was a bit odd, but I kept an eye on it. It didn't really affect me. And then jump forward 10 years, more, 15 years, at the beginning of lockdown, really. I was at home like we all were with my kids, and we were just messing around. I think I was playing dead with my little girl, who was probably 4, 5 at the time. Yeah. And I was playing dead on the floor, and she got right up to my ear, maybe a centimeter, and she just gave it her all into my ear. Just a wake up, Dad, but straight in. And that on top of the damage I'd had before, and probably the damage I do from being around music so much, that wrecked that ear. So that's my right ear pretty much gone. I'd say that I'm probably 10% I have on that ear. It's, if I put my finger in and out of the other ear, it's as good as putting headphones in.
Wow, Jim, I remember you telling me this because we were working on a major project. You were producing, I think Rhys Lewis or someone like that signed to Decca. So it was a big artist. There was a lot of pressure on you, and I don't know how you managed to steer clear of too much trauma, but you were able to. Well, we're talking about your grandfather. Maybe you were channeling great man. You were able to put it aside. I don't know how you did it, because you actually were almost complete, like you say, you were completely pretty much deaf in that right ear, weren't you?
Yeah, as good as, and it's come back to a degree, but not enough to be useful. Now, the reason I'm telling you about my other ear is because the left ear was always the good ear. It was always the slightly worse ear. It maybe had a little bit of tinnitus, but nothing to ever notice. But as soon as I lost this ear became, my good ear. And the tinnitus just shone through. It was its time to shine. And I suppose the being in lockdown, the only having the one ear to focus on, it just zoomed right up in volume, and it attenuated through the roof. And then it became a real thing, a real issue. So over the last, let's say 3 years-ish, I've had next to nothing in this ear to talk about, and then really quite bad tinnitus in this ear. And so for me, it's new-ish, but I've not been lucky enough to have time away from what I do. So I've had to find ways to just carry on, just to keep going with it and work with it. Because without wanting to sound, desperately British, it was, I didn't really have any other option. It's, this is what I do. So I had to find ways around it.
Incredible. I mean, from talking to you about it, because obviously, I'm not just interested in you because you're my friend. I mean, I like talking, you like talking. We like to find out about one another and life and everything. And it's like, I wanted to find out more about that ear, and we were talking about it in depth. And then it came to pass that you explained to me that you'd had a grommet. So you'd had some kind of work in it prior to that when you were a child, weren't you?
Yeah, when I was a child. I don't know the science of it at all. And I'll be honest with you, I don't really know why I had it, and I don't know what. I think it's been debunked now. I don't think you have them anymore. But a grommet, from what I understand, was a way of keeping part of your eardrum open the whole time, I think, or something. It was an implant in your ear. And when I looked into the damage to my blown ear, everyone I spoke to very quickly went, "Oh, you had a grommet." They all spotted it straight away, and a few people, in a very professional way, inferred that, well, actually maybe the damage was done many years ago, and there was an inherent weakness left from it that this has been exposed to, and that's what's started this all off. The ear that's blown is the eardrum is a wreck. It's a real mess. But that, if you go back maybe 36 years or something, that was the first thing that I had done to my ear, and a lot of people, a lot of professionals that I spoke to spotted it and were very damning of it as a process.
Crikey. So I was going to ask you that as well. So when you went to the doctor with this new situation with your right ear, I mean, what was the treatment? What was the path back to any kind of significant wellness? What was the treatment plan you were given?
Without wanting to be down on the NHS or be down on anyone in particular, next to none is the truth. I was given a few hearing tests, spoke to a few experts, but actually, to be honest, that was off my own back. But if I went just via my local doctor, who I did see first, it was very much like, well, having a hearing test, you've damaged that ear. That's it. There was no, solutions. There's no path back to anything, which maybe in some ways formed the beginning of my way of dealing with this, which was to, kind of muscle through it. I think that I kind of it's not a case of giving up. I was like, oh, well, I can't solve this. It's more a case of I'm just going to make this work, however. And then I spoke to a few, good experts, and there wasn't really ever a path out of this given to me. It was more just, this is what your ear is doing now. This is what it can hear. This is what it can't hear. Here's your graph, and try not to get stressed because that won't help. And just these really generalized statements, if I'm being quite honest.
Absolutely. It's making me sweat. It's really weird. It's making my feet really hot hearing your story. my hands are sweating. I feel it, Jim. I absolutely feel that. I was going to ask you as well. I'm not expecting maybe a great answer here, but in the sense that I doubt it's that positive. But was there any consideration from the medical establishment that you were also a producer? Did they ask what you did with your life in the sense that?
Well, I told them. When I did tell them, and I went through it, but honestly, when I told them that, it was almost met with, I was using it as a way to skip the queue. Oh, actually, I'm more important. I use my ears. Blah blah blah. Is how it was. And I should be very clear. No one particular was, treated me terribly, or no one was rude or bullish in any way. But there just seemed to be this general. It's a big word I'm going to use, but ignorance to it. It's kind of like, well, you can go and see the specialist, and the specialist will kind of, like I said before, measure your ears, tell you how bad they are, but they won't give you any kind of. I didn't get any route out, which was a disappointment, because the thing with doing what I do, or doing what any musician does, is you rely entirely on your ears. That's it. All of this gear that I'm sat around in here doesn't matter for anything if you can't hear it. It's stupid. There's no, if all the gear, no idea. It's very true. You can have the most expensive desk in the world, but you sit an amateur at it and they're going to make a horrible noise. But you put an expert at a very cheap desk and they will get a good sound out of it. Your ears, in my job, that's number one. That's the most important instrument. So to be told in no uncertain terms, well, that one's knackered and that one's on its way out, is frightening. It's frightening. Really is. Yeah, it is, because it doesn't feel like there's many places to turn. And also, and everyone listening will understand this, any kind of hearing damage is so insular, because it's quite literally in your head the whole time. You go to bed with it, you wake up with it, you have poo, it's there, you go for a run, it's never gone. And it just picks away at you, it just jabs away at you. And I think I went for a period of time of being quite down about it and trying to find ways to trick myself out of it. I went and did a meditation course. It turns out it's not for me. That didn't work for me. I loved the process of it, and I can understand that maybe somewhere in the future it will be great. But trying to meditate in lockdown in a house with 2 kids, but to finding 40 minutes a day of absolute silence is just a joke. That's stupid. And it also turns out that as much as I enjoyed having a mantra, my thoughts on completely random things were just stronger. So I had to, it was actually my wife who eventually told me to stop, because I was just getting so annoyed. But I clinged on, it's the truth, to anything that I thought might do it. I thought, well, if I can, do all this transcendental meditation, and when it's really bad, I can focus and get rid of it. That didn't work. And then in the end, I think the the biggest tool I found is the acceptance of it. It's just going, okay, well, it's here. It's clearly not going anywhere for now. It's how do I work around it? How do I knock it off its pedestal? And how do I stop thinking about it as much as I am? It was the point I got to.
It's incredible. You got to acceptance so quickly. I mean, I was astonished, Jim, how quickly you accepted it. I couldn't believe how you managed to work your way around it in the studio. I couldn't believe it. And you were giving people a great experience. You were making everybody relax. You were making me feel good. You were making the artist feel amazing. You were looking after Rob, he was looking after you, but you were servicing everybody. And it was during your moment of absolute crisis. And I wonder also, in a way, it's like there isn't one route, is there, to tinnitus wellness? For me, it wasn't too dissimilar. It was sound therapy that I made in the really early days, and then my own sort of archaic voltage controlled oscillating synthesizers in 2008 when I had it again. So I was able to mimic and create almost like an oral skin graft. But throughout all of that, what I needed to do was run like hell nearly every day, twice a day.
Yeah.
So a bit like yourself, I mean, I think we're quite up as people. I mean, we're very positive, I would like to say.
Yeah.
And I think we're very excited by things. So something like yoga would have been, I'm not saying it's not wrong, exactly what you were saying, you know, meditation really works. But I wasn't in that space. I hadn't truly accepted it to get to a place where I could sit down and be really peaceful with myself. It's like all I wanted to do was just run like the fastest I could and just run it all out of me and just get dog tired was my first kind of instance. And then,
well, you see, weirdly enough, that's exactly what I did. And I know you know this, but just before, it's all such a mess the last few years, but I went to Camp Festival with my family. And it was really loud, and it was fine. It was fine, but I got back and my tinnitus was quite bad at the time, and I thought, right, I need to do something. And so I did the same as you. I started running, and it became this out and out joke because I became like a lot of us musicians do. I became obsessed with it. So I went from okay, well, I'll tell you what, I'll walk every day for a couple of weeks to see what happens. Oh, that's quite good. Oh, well, I'll run every day for a couple of weeks to see what happens. And then within 6 months, I was doing it. So I was doing like 160 miles a month kind of. I just didn't stop, and I loved it. But I found that outside of the meditation and, like you say, yoga or anything else, you know, relaxing with a glass of wine, that was the only thing that did it for me. And so apart from the dramatic weight loss, it was so beneficial to me. Just there's something about I think really exerting yourself that really makes a difference. It does to my ears. If I mean my literal ears. If even now, if I'm really tired or if I'm really stressed or anything negative, the first thing that comes up is the tinnitus. It loves to sort of find a reason to get to the forefront, like, you know, I'm here sort of thing. And still to this day, if I'm really bad with anything, the very first thing I'll do is just run. Like Forrest Gump, I'll just run round and round and round and round and round. And it's, people always tell you, don't they? They always say, oh, you know, healthy body, healthy mind and all that. But it's very difficult to believe all that stuff when people say it to you. But when you do it and you see a positive reaction, it's so addictive. It feels like cheating. It's like, well, hang on. Oh, you mean that all along I could just run outside my house and I'll feel better? Well, that's free. I've got legs. I'll do that. You know, and it was just magnificent. And then I suppose throughout lockdown, I kept it going to a degree. But then, as you'll see a theme here, as the way my body works, I just did it so much I gave myself crippling sciatica. so I couldn't run anymore. So then I went on the bike and, you know, but I think that when it was bad, and like the periods you're talking about when I was first really struggling with it, the way that I'm the most lucky is I work as you know, I work as in a duo. Me and my brother work together. We worked together for a very long time. Along with being a better everything within the studio than I am, a better musician, a better engineer, you know, he happens to be a perfect yin to my yang, and you can contest this. That Rob will, I'll say 100 things that are all nonsense. Rob will say one thing that is perfect, and that's fine. But when it comes to keeping the bands happy and talking to them and going, oh, why don't we try that guitar sound through a shoe, that would be interesting. You know, I'm that guy. Whereas Rob then facilitates my nonsense. And when it came to me being really bad, I was just so lucky because he could facilitate all the stuff I couldn't do. If I was in a period of time where I just couldn't hear anything, he would just take that on. He would just, you know, don't worry. Or if we had it, as anyone that works together for a long time, we had this ability to give each other a look. You know, if I was sat at the desk and he was watching me flipping a phase button in and out for 10 minutes because I couldn't tell anymore, he'll just quietly, not telling the band, he'd just quietly come over and just do it, give me a look. I was like, all right, that's in phase. And that was invaluable. But knowing that someone was there that had my back in the audio world, you know, in the audio side of things, was everything. And it allowed me to find other things within my job to focus on. Like you say, the production, the managing the people, the trying to get more energy out of something. Because I feel like if I had been on my own with it, I probably would have stopped, is the truth. And I still have days like it. I've done it only today, mixing something today, or Rob and I are mixing something today, and we were doing fine, or Rob was doing fine, and then I sat down at it, and after about 10 minutes, I just said to him, I can't hear it. He said, well, what do you mean? I said, no, I can't hear if this is a good mix, if that's too loud, if this is mushed, I can't hear anything. And it can happen like that. And maybe I'm tired, maybe I didn't sleep well last night, but the truth of it is, I used to run away from that. I would panic and go, right, and I'd go outside, go for a 10, 15 minute, an hour walk to try and find some headspace to come back to it. But and we were talking about this while we were waiting to come on, I've just decided and developed this thing where I give myself 30 seconds. No matter what it is, I give myself 30 seconds. So 30 seconds in this studio that I'm in now walks me probably to the doorway. I touch the bonnet in my car and come back again. So I leave the control room, and this morning I had a proper tantrum. And then I ran through and I sort of stood in out in the car park for maybe 5 seconds, turn around, and I just sit back at it. Because it's the way that I've managed to get through this is by not giving into it. The fear, someone said to me once, fear is a liar. And it stuck with me massively. You know, the idea that these things you're worried about and you're so scared of, they're just nonsense. It's absolute nonsense. And it's true. So the quicker I get back to it and I sit there and go, no, come on. And it's funny, I sit down and it's still mushy and it's still not making a lot of sense. But after 2 minutes, maybe, oh, hang on, that made sense then. And then, oh, now that makes sense. And within 10 minutes, I'm back. And it's managing the hearing problems, but it's also managing the mental health side of it as well. The panic that, oh, I'm not going to be able to do my job. Is this my last week? You know, all of that kind of things. So it's so, I think what's fascinating about hearing loss and hearing problems, it's multifaceted. It's 1,000 things. It's never as simple as one thing. It's death by 1,000 cuts. Like I say to you, you know, I hate, and I'm sure a lot of people that are listening can agree with me here. I've just developed this thing where I can't be in silence. I hate it. I avoid it at all costs, all costs. So I'll go to sleep with a podcast or white noise or something. But even if I'm around the house, I won't ever have still. And that's why I like, and as I know you do, I like walking. I live right by the sea. So that's just a wonderful sonic therapy, just to walk by that and just have your brain taken away from your own tinnitus for a minute is wonderful. So I actively, I look for those things. That's the truth. And whether they're good things or bad things, for example, this control room I'm in now has a garage just there, just 10 foot that way. And they put in a thing called a rolling road, which is like a running machine for cars. Yeah. And this thing is ridiculously loud. And it doesn't go through to the live room, luckily, but it vibrates this whole room. And it's got this really low frequency. But when it comes on, I kind of like it, because if there's nothing playing, it's a therapy for me. It takes me away from that silence that I avoid. And being slightly perverse and enjoying these crazy things, it's all part of it for me. Just going, it's hilarious that I look forward to the rolling road going on, but I do, and that's Jim, just through it.
That is incredible. I feel really similar to the way that you view it. Also, it's incredible. I mean, just going back to this idea of fear is a liar. So right from the beginning, you've got the measure of fear. It was the same for me. I had to really look at fear, because that was obviously the thing, like yourself, you were talking about how you manage, and importantly, how you perceive and react to fear, for me was really important. So I love that notion of fear being a liar. For me, it was, I remember it happened. It was like I haven't had many of them in my life, but I had this panic attack, I remember, and it was due to the tinnitus when I was about 22 and a half or something. It was after that gig where I came off stage with 8 different tinnitus sounds. And I remember being so fearful. And then I suddenly had this realization. I think it was my own kind of release valve or safety net. Suddenly the image of me laughing at the idea of fear, because I remember thinking, I'm being afraid of being fearful. So I'm afraid of being afraid. And I laughed uncontrollably. I remember I was just thinking, this is crazy. It's the fear of fear itself. But I'm not afraid. I'm just afraid of being fearful. You know, it was, and also what you're saying as well, which I think is really incredible, is exactly the kind of therapy that I do with myself, and I try and encourage it with other people in the community. And you're doing it is, I always kind of equate it in my own kind of way as like, I think of something like Predator or RoboCop, where you're kind of like, you're taking sound from everywhere because you're kind of programmed to come to planet Earth and to take in everything that it offers, sonically, visually, everything. And it's like you're taking the quiet, okay, and you're going, yeah, okay, but I'm not really, don't need that, so I'm going to look for something else. And like you say, you're taking solace in a roller, or you're outside in the walk, so you're developing your own kind of skills of hearing. So you're taking in everything that is being provided to you, and you're using it. So you're using it as a way of creating a place where it's just, you're constantly dealing with almost like this secure environment of sound, aren't you?
Well, yeah, that's it. And I think that it's almost, I think of it almost like a toolkit. If you're, but it's true. If you're wandering along and you notice, oh, do you know what? For the last 25 minutes, I've walked by the sea and I didn't notice my tinnitus then.
Brilliant.
Right, big effing tick, put that on the list. That's one, you know, or I like the sound of walking on gravel because it's, you know, anything like that. I make these mental notes of them, and I must have this long scroll of things in my head that I know I can go to if I'm especially bad. You know, I'm lucky in some ways that I've got 2 young children and a dog, and the house is never quiet. It's never quiet. But if I ever find, you know, let's say everyone's gone out or something, and I find myself sat on the sofa for a moment, it doesn't take me 10 seconds to notice the tinnitus. It's always there. That little, you know, that bugger is always just waiting. And it's, I'm amazed that after all these years and all of these different mechanisms I've put in place to get away from it and deal with it when it happens, how quickly it still comes to the forefront. That's incredible. And I'm still trying to take its power away. That's my ultimate goal with any fear, the fear of, you know, being in a room with a band you don't know, or, you know, going for a job interview or whatever. For me, it's all about finding a way to get through the fear and just come out the other side. And one of the strongest things I've ever come across is just I suppose it's a mindfulness exercise to some degree, but it's just it's visualization, really. I have a very visual mind, and if someone reads something to me, that's great. But if you show me some visualization or give me something I can put in my mind palace, that's infinitely more powerful. It really is something. And the one that I found that I like the most is just visualizing the end of whatever you're going through is. So let's say I've had a bad day today and my tinnitus feels really loud because I've been around all of this, you know, loud music. And if I start to find myself panicked, and panicked is a genuine word for it because it can feel all consuming. If I feel myself panicked, I just stop what I'm doing and I just think about, well, 7 o'clock tonight, I'll be back at home, I'll be sat with the kids or whatever, and I let myself feel that emotion of, oh, I got through it and I'm home. But do you see what I'm saying? You jump forward. That's so powerful, and you sort of see past the initial fear that you have right where you are, and you kind of go out and you go and do your thing.
Absolutely. I feel the same as you, Jim. I think it's because we're artists, and I visualize everything. So in the early days, the idea was that it was a tinnitus monster on my back, and what I would do is I would try and turn it every day into a docile pet, and then eventually let it run free. But then the fear was always, and I think we probably most of us in the community, you know, when we think we're okay with our tinnitus, we kind of go, right, I'm not going to be in the groups anymore. I'm not going to look at anything. I'm not going to talk about it. I'm sort of all right. Although I'm actually not all right. I can only say that from my own experience, but it's not terrible. But the monster was always on my back. It's kind of like, even though it was a docile pet, I still needed more work to do. Now I don't have it. I don't have a tinnitus monster. It went off into the forest and we've just said goodbye. We parted as friends, but we're not there anymore. And then, like you say, when you have those moments where, and we'll get onto that in a very short while if you don't mind, because I'd love to know how you deal with maybe some of those issues with the spikes, but you know, because that really can play on a person. But yeah, if it gets too much for me, or I feel like, I explain it to myself, it's like it's a bit hot. I feel the heat. And what I would do is just go back to almost like the way that I feel about the tinnitus conundrum is like a bit like kind of like crystal maze or something like that, where I'm in a maze and it's the tinnitus maze, but in my mind it's exactly what you say. I need to exit it for a little while, and it might mean that, you know, what I might do is I might buy something like an instrument on eBay or something like that, or I will excite myself, so I'll create positivity out of something that seemingly seems insurmountably bad. And because, like you said earlier on, tinnitus despises kind of disorder, chaos and anxiety and fear. It hates it. So I'll try and find little strategies. They might be simple. I might just buy, I don't know, a pair of drumsticks or something, or think about a meal I'm going to cook, or a conversation I might have, or meeting you, going to going for a walk, or going to do a session, you know.
Well, it's what I like to do is, in the same way that I collect sounds that, you know, I notice sounds that stop me hearing the tinnitus, I like to keep a mental log of times when I've gone through it, when I've had something. Let's say Rob and I have been working at another studio, and we find that stressful. We're home birds, Rob and I. We will work from other studios, but we're not necessarily keen on it, and there is a certain amount of stress to that. So if I do a couple of days somewhere, you know, in London or wherever, and we get through it, that's a big tick for me, what I call a little victory. And I'll keep that. And if I ever find myself really kind of going into my tinnitus and my hearing and stuff, I just recall them, just like a highlight reel in my head, because it's amazing to go back over the things you managed to do yourself with tinnitus and get through it anyway. It's very powerful. It's just, the more you think about it, you kind of inflate your self-worth over the tinnitus, and it just gets smaller and smaller and smaller. It just starts to shut the F up. It's great. I'm amazed that I haven't sworn yet. I'm very passionate on the subject, but like, I feel like grabbing it by the throat metaphorically is a very powerful thing, you know, and there's so much in the world that can get you anyway, you know. It's good to not bow down to any of this stuff. And that's how I really feel about it. So if it wants to sort of take me on, well, come on then, but I'm not going to go down easy. I'm going to make this, you know, difficult for you. And sometimes just being, you know, just standing straight up to it and go, right, well, I'm going to have the 10 seconds and I'm going to come back to this anyway. And guess what? I'll win. It's good. It's really good. There's a confidence to it that actually empowers you. And it's funny. It does just quieten the voice of tinnitus, I find. Anyway, for me, the confidence is everything.
You're absolutely right. I'm bursting with pride listening to you. I really am. I love you. I think it's just incredible. I love it. And it's so similar, this very similar pattern of events. I felt the same. I felt like my visual diary and my memory of past, kind of like the achievement was for me, as we both know, because we live on an island. So with hyperacusis or tinnitus, it's like, for me, it was outside of my door, onto a boat, which is vibratory and makes a noise, then onto a train, and then onto Waterloo and a tube, and then to the Jubilee line, to tow rag, you know, to hang, and then do a live session, you know, and there's all that beautiful pressure. You're in the snake pit, making music, and you know, everybody's focused on their instruments, and then Liam might say, ahoy there, right, okay, you know, and then you know, you don't want to put a foot wrong, and then you go back home. And, you know, that might be like a couple of days or a really late night, because obviously there's the late car ferry. So you're back home at 3, but you're smiling because you've survived. Like I used to equate it, and even like doing some early sessions with you, Jim, when I might have been struggling in the early days, I would see it as like that. My visualization was like a kind of, you're going into the gladiatorial arena.
Sure.
and you're fighting lions, and it's to the death. So it could be this is the day I absolutely die.
Yeah, but
I don't know, but that's how strongly I felt about turning up and doing work with you, or any work that for me just felt so valuable to my, you know, to myself and to the people I was working with.
I think it's key, but what I also think is good to remember, almost on an equal footing, that let's take that example you've just given. You've gone up to toe rag and you're really trying hard to be in the session, and then at some point you're going to need to take a pee. I promise you that minute you go in that room on your own, take a pee, the tinnitus go, all right, it'll just come in there, just enough to let you know it's there. Or you have to go to the shop to get, you know, a bag of crisps. On the way back, it's go, I am here. And it's all right for it to not go away entirely, but it's kind of like when it does come out, it's like, oh, out of it kind of thing, you know? It's when you're in the toilet and you hear it and it crumbles you. It's like, no, none of that. I think it's really important to remember with any of these let's just call them problems, that they're not going to go away quickly, especially if you have a genuine hearing condition. But I'm talking more about your mental capacity to deal with it. I feel like it's really important just to go with, this is an awful thing, but I remember a therapist once said to me about, with regards to fear and panic attacks and anxiety, that to think of them like you're a surfer in the ocean, in that you know that you're paddling out there, you know there's waves, you know those waves are going to hit you, but guess what? The wave is going to go over you and you'll paddle on a bit more. And guess what? There'll be another wave. And guess what? And there's something about that that's really interesting, I think, which is knowing that, you know, for all of the effort you'll make, you'll still have tinnitus in your quiet moments. You'll still have that fear and it will still get to you, but almost just knowing and going, yeah, well, I knew that's coming anyway. Off it goes. I'll wait for it. You know, there's something powerful in just being confident in yourself to know that you will go past it. And it's not going to get you just as bad as as you think it will. Fear is a liar. It really is. That's my MO. I should have had it written on the wall.
I think I'd like a baseball hat with that on. Brilliant, Jim. I've got a question from one of the community.
Sure.
I'd love to ask.
Yeah.
Can I ask you if you have to listen at low levels? I'm a film and TV editor and listen at very low levels. I'm not sure if it's good or bad to do that.
Well, I can only talk from what I do here. So you see behind here, we've got these speakers, and these are called Amphion speakers. Now, apart from the fact they sound very, very, very nice, one of the main reasons we have Amphion speakers is they're not very fatiguing. So when I say fatiguing, some speakers can be very bombastic in their low end, and it can be hyped up, or the high end is very explosive and sharp. And after a very short amount of time, you'll become tired with that. These speakers, and I'm not sponsored by them, it sounds like I am, they're very good for fatigue. You can listen at decent levels for most of the day and come away and not feel tired by them. I have, because of my ear that doesn't work as well, I have a tendency to listen quite loud, not stupidly loud. I know a few mastering engineers that, you know, listen so loud that when I go there, I have to put my fingers in my ears. But I would say that as long as you can do your work within audio, as long as you can do what you need to do, it doesn't matter what volume you're listening to it at. You know, my brother that I work with listens at half the volume I do. I know people that listen at double the volume that I do.
Oh, yeah.
As long as you can hear the detail in what you're doing to the point where you can do your job, then what's the problem? It's how I see it. You know, and if that is, like I was talking to you before, I'm looking into headphones. If I'm doing that in headphones or I'm doing it on speakers, I don't mind how I get there as long as I get there. And that's how I'd answer that, is that if you can do your job quiet and it doesn't affect you, then do it quiet. There's no benefit to loud. You won't, if you've got a good hearing, good speakers or good headphones, loud's not going to give you that much more. You'll be seduced by it. Volume can be very seductive. Sometimes you can see this with some plugins. You know, you have a bass channel and you'll put a plugin on and instantly it sounds better. Like, wow, that's better. But when you look into it, it's because there's a 2 dB bump. It's just louder. Volume is really seductive. So I would say as long as you can do what you can do, the volume doesn't matter.
That's a great answer, Jim. We have another one pertaining to the loudness of music and whether it masks. So the question is this, Jim. Dear Jim, when listening to loud music, I find it masks my tinnitus. which seems odd. Does loud music mask the tinnitus with you, Rupert and Jim? So if you'd like to answer that one, please, Jim.
Well, it depends on what my attention is on. So, for example, if, as we're talking now, and I'm quite loud in my own ears, if I decide to listen for it, I can hear the tinnitus. So if, when I'm listening to the speakers behind me in a mix, generally 80% of the time I'm distracted by what I'm doing, and I'm worrying that, oh, that snare drum doesn't sound very good, or blah, 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 blah. And so I don't listen for the tinnitus. But if I had, you know, a light up there that came on, said, listen for your tinnitus, it's there. I only have to focus on it. So ultimately, I think it's more that having things quite loud, for me, it distracts me from the tinnitus more. That's all it is. I can still hear the tinnitus over anything, under the water, in headphones, you know, at a rock concert. I hear it if I want to anywhere. That's
really interesting. I'm the exact opposite, but there's no right or wrong. I really like the music quite well. I like playing emotional music loud that makes me feel something. So I was playing Peter Gabriel's Passion, which I just love it. And there's some serious kind of Billy Cobham low toms in there, and I knew it was going to give me more tinnitus, but it was like, well, okay, well, I'm going to have some fun though. And you know, it will only last maybe for the evening and into the morning, but I loved it. It was great. I really felt something, and I need to feel things. I have to feel that. When I play music, or when I come to you, it has to feel like something. Otherwise, I'm not going to work with you. I'm not going to want to turn up or do anything, because it's all about feel and emotion. And I
think it's important to allow yourself those, you know, audible pleasures, if you want to call it that. Not to spend your whole life thinking, oh, well, I shouldn't really have the, you know, that film up a bit louder, or I shouldn't really go to cinema because it's ridiculously loud. It's like, let's remember that quite soon we'll all be dead. And then do you want to spend most of it just worrying that, you know, Gladiator was too loud at the cinema? I don't. I really don't. And if I want to if I want to put some big, stupid headphones on and play a first-person shooter game on the Xbox every night, I'm going to do it, because I'm aware of my tinnitus to the point where I'm not doing anything that's damaging it overtly. I'm being sensible, but I'm not being constrained by it, because I feel like letting it constrain me in ways like that, it just gains a certain power, and then it will only become louder, you know, mentally to me. So it's important to me to give back to myself occasionally.
That's really interesting that you say that, because also I would say that manifests in many ways. That then eats into your own personality, Jim. And from knowing you so well musically, and as a friend, as a person, as an artist, you have a lovely sense of bravery about what you do with your art. You're a pioneer. You really are. And that comes from exactly that kind of that way that you feel about yourself, and the way that you want to go into uncharted territories, and you're brave enough to want to do that, and take the wrong road, take the wrong corner, and see where it goes, because you're brave enough to understand if it's the right way or the wrong way. There is none for you. There's no distinction, I don't think, with you. It's like you literally, you're a very brave person that I think is intrepid. That's why one of the great things that I enjoy about working with you, it's completely open. It's like you're brave enough to just chuck paint at the wall and see where it lands, and then work with that, and then kind of find out where it's going. And I think that really equates with the way that you deal with your hearing issues. Absolutely. I was going to say problem, but I don't. From talking to you and from knowing you, I've never seen it as being a problem. It's an issue. It's just an issue.
Yeah. It's a joke with my parents. It's just another thing. It seems like I hit 35, and then I get these new things like, oh, I've got a hurting knee, and then it doesn't go away. I've noticed that I just get something new that distracts me from it. I'm just this list of failing body parts at this point, and I don't let it bother me, because what am I going to do? I try and be healthy-ish. I try and, you know, do exercise-ish. I'm doing everything that I can. So I'm just not going to beat myself up. This whole idea of being, you know, gently brave and maverick in your approach to things, I think is really a really strong way of looking at the mental aspect of tinnitus, because everyone is much stronger than they think. And especially with something like this, that it's only down to you. That's the horrible thing, isn't it? That you can go and speak to 1,000 experts and they can give you fantastic advice, and that's great. And you can cling on to it. But ultimately, at the end of the day, when you turn the light off and go to bed, it's you and it. It's you and the tinnitus. It's you and the tinnitus in the loose, you and tinnitus on the walk. And if you can find a way of just every so often going, oh, not today, I'm done with you today. I'm going to do this regardless, and see what it does. I bet you it backs down a bit. It does, and there's a certain brilliance in bravery. I think sometimes it's very stupid, going over the trench first or whatever. But I feel that with things like this, you've nothing to lose. You're not gonna make it worse by being brave. You're not. Just have at it. Is what I think.
It's a brilliant answer. It's brilliant. We've got one that we got a lovely question here, and I was going to ask it myself, and I'm going to ask this person's question because it's a great question. And it's really important. Today's really important, Jim. Not only is it Tinnitus Awareness Week, which is why you're a very special guest today. And it's like, also, you are probably one of the only producers that really is openly speaking about tinnitus, because there is a stigma. And this is the question. It's a great question. Do you think there is a stigma in the industry about producers, stroke musicians working with tinnitus? How do we make sure that others that don't have it know that we can still work successfully? Great question.
It is a great question. The truth is, I can only talk for the music industry.
Yeah.
And the music industry is fantastically binary in some sense, in some respects, in that your A&R men, your acts, your managers, your radio players, whoever, they don't care how you do the music. You could do it on a laptop, you can do it on a reel-to-reel, you can do it in Africa with, it doesn't matter as long as it's good. And I could get through an entire album process without them ever asking me about my ear, as long as it sounds good. They don't care. And so a lot of the time, if people ask me about it, I'll tell them straight out. I'll go, yeah, I've got hearing problems and blah, blah. And that's why if we're in the live room, I'll wear hearing, blah, 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 blah. And I'll tell them. But I honestly don't think that people, in my experience, would judge you for it. Now, we've had the discussions recently, me and my brother and me and my wife, that at some point soon, I'm sure I'll have to wear hearing aids, in my bad ear at least. And what does that look like? I'm 44, walking into a record label with a hearing aid when the last 3 producers that have come in have been 25, have had a string of hits and are all, virile and tense. What does that, am I setting myself up to fail there? Am I laying out my stall wrong? And I honestly don't think I am, because I would say to anything like this, well, judge me on my work. If I'm not doing the work very well, then fine. I'll put my hands up, cool, I'll back away, I'm not the right man for the job. But if I'm doing my job well with 2 hearing aids, an eye patch, it doesn't matter, does it? It doesn't matter. And a lot of the good people in the industry, there are 4 or 5 of them, they are aware of my hearing things, but it's never brought up. So we've been mixing for a band recently, and the manager knows all too well about all my problems, but not once has he doubted us. Not once has he questioned any of my decisions, because he trusts the results. And I think it's important to be confident in what you can do, rather than fearing what you might not be able to do because of the thing. But it's like anything. There are people that will see it differently, but if they do, that's just dumb. It's so dumb. A lot of things to do with creative processes, whether it be art or music or drama or whatever. It's about knowledge and experience. I could probably, this is a great, brilliantly big statement, but I could probably make a half decent record with no hearing, because I know when a band are in the right mood. I know when the song is going down well, and I really feel like if you start to let people call you out for a problem that doesn't matter, then that's almost on you. Do you know what I mean? If an A&R man was to say to me, oh well, but your hearing's shot out here, it's like, and what of it? Don't you worry about that. I'll worry about the sound of it. You do a half decent ad campaign at the end. And I think that's how I would go at anyone. But there will be some people, but who worries about some people.
You're absolutely right. It's the absolute result at the end of it. It's absolutely the result. I totally agree.
It absolutely is. I mean, there is a stigma to it, but I think it's lessening with the same as anything. I would feel, if I'm being completely open, if I walked into a label and I had hearing aids in, I would be aware of them. But knowing me the way I am, I'd probably get bright pink ones from the 50s that I had to carry a wind up. But I'd make a thing of it. I'd be like, if I can make a good record with hearing aids, then, you know, what's the problem?
Absolutely brilliant. Yeah. It's kind of like you've got that kind of Mr. Swarovski attitude, that lovely old guy, old bloke from Fame.
Yeah.
Whereby, and it was, it's that whole thing. It was very similar to when I used to teach, and I taught in a music college for 18 years. And I remember it wasn't necessarily the college, but there was a kind of a thing going around, the kind of buzz around the whole of the UK and teaching was kind of like this thing about being down with the kids, and that you had to be of a similar age. And my feeling was always, no, I don't think, I think quite the opposite. I think I actually need to be way removed from that situation, because what I'm going to try and do is give them this beautiful line that they will know whether they're allowed to cross it or not to cross it. The line will be danger, and the danger will be making great music. And the idea that you would teach them all the ingredients to make French cuisine, rather than just the idea that you would make a hot dog, i.e. you'll just teach them what they want. The idea is that they're coming there to learn something that they never thought they might have a chance of learning. And that's the idea. And then when they're making their hot dog pop music, it's got French cuisine in it, so it's got something different.
I love that.
That was always my thing.
It's good.
That's why I could justify being a lot older and being okay with that. It really didn't bother me.
We used to have, we don't have, oh no, it's on our old keyboard. We used to have the way it works in the studio these days is you normally have a little QWERTY keyboard, but because I'm sat like this, the bands don't see it. So we used to have little messages on the keyboard to each other. And I had to have one printed on the spacebar that just said, remember, these people are not your friends. And that seems really negative. And it's not like, oh, don't do them in extra favors. It's a little bit of that, but it's also what you just said. It's that I'm not here to make bad decisions because I don't want to offend them. No. Or hard decisions rather. I'm here to try and produce their music the best way it can be. And if that's the best way to do that is for me to be a cantankerous old bugger for a day, then all right, there you go, it's fine. And it's one of those little maxims. Is it a maxim or whatever it is? A little statement that actually works within creative things. It's not to be distracted by being everyone's friend. It's not necessary. I'm going off on a tangent here, but very rarely are the most talented people I meet nice people. It doesn't always work that way. You know, quite often you can be really lovely and a terrible musician, or you can be a right difficult bugger and you're so talented. It's like, you know, remember, these people are not your friends.
It's brilliant, Jim. Okay, I've got so many questions, and so many have come in as well, Jim.
Go.
Going back to the band that you were working with recently, that were called the Estebans. They're just fantastic band, by the way. I love your first productions with them, and now they've changed it. And it's fine to mention the names because they're great. You were being really complimentary, but what you were talking about was, and what they represent is a young generation of people listening to their own music really loudly. And could you explain a little bit about how they're listening and how they're devouring their music?
Well, do you know, we found this quite a bit. You can, in a studio environment, you set the levels in this room and we're listening to them, but then the bands in the live room, I'm not going to show you, they have their own headphone systems and they can tweak those so they can have more of them or more drums, and you know, they've got control of the volume. We are perpetually shocked and appalled at how loud people listen to music. We can go open our door and start to walk through to the live room, and I can hear the playback through their headphones. It's that loud. You know, I can get them this close to my head and it's almost too loud. And I hate to generalize, but it is a bit of an age thing. And with the Estebans, and they're called Telecom, they're called now. We were talking to them. We went out for a meal after the session, and they were talking about how loud they listen to their phones. And I think 3 out of 4 of them all listened to it redlined, you know, the whole time. And they said, oh, you know, if I don't listen to it like that, I can't hear it properly. And then we had this long conversation where I was we were talking about them protecting their hearing now. They're 20, I think, but they rehearse in a like a shipping container thing, which is small, with the drums and all that. And we were just talking about ways of them protecting their ears, because they're not, especially at the moment. And people pick up funny, not this band, but people pick up these funny bits of advice about, oh, well, you do this, and I use the ones that I got from B&Q. They're good, and all this. And you have to, I'm just forever saying, no, not that. But the thing that was, and if they're watching, they won't mind me saying, the thing that was the most alarming about talking to the young band, or any young band, I remember Rhys Lewis doing the same thing, is trying to get them to understand the value of their hearing so young. When you're 20, you don't think you're going to have hearing issues. And I'm sort of saying to them, I remember being 20 and didn't think it'd be an issue, and trying to say to them, look, spend 300 quid or whatever it is now on some good molded IEMs and just protect your ears. But when I was saying to them, I think that one of them said to me, yeah, but I'm not going to spend 200 quid on headphones. And it's funny, if you break that down over the years of use you'll get out of them, it's nothing. It's just a very different mindset. And it's a shame that and I don't know if it's an education thing or what, but people should know how easy it is to damage their ears, and what it's going to be like when they're 44 and having to walk by the sea to get a bit of rest. You know, it's a funny thing. We're all humans are guilty of it, thinking it will never happen to us. But with listening to stuff loudly, and especially with phones and earpods and all of that, I think it's really easy just to listen to them maxed right out. And as I mentioned earlier, volume is seductive. If you put headphones on and start to listen to a song at a certain volume and get used to it, and then you turn it down, it sounds like junk. And it's not. It's just quieter. I'd love for somehow people to understand that from teenage years, if they just protect their hearing, it will last, without want to sound a cliche, quite literally a lifetime.
You're absolutely right, Jim. I mean, I wish I had done. I mean, I've got bags of earplugs, and I mean, I would never have been able to do your sessions or any sessions unless I'd have had my ears protected. I mean, absolutely, it's a no-brainer. I mean, what do you ever use? We have a question here, and that ties in nicely with the earplugs, which is, do you ever use earplugs in the studio, or if you were going out live, say, with Van Patterson Quartet? Or anything,
so we have these.
What would you use?
We have, I think these are actually Rob's ones.
Yeah.
We have these ones. Oh no, these are my ones. So this is another thing that's only interesting in this forum. I have really oddly shaped ear canals. So look at my ear canals. They're really, really odd. But we have these. So right ear, left ear, and they have the interchangeable, whatever you would call that. So I can change from 5 dB to 20 dB to whatever. And I can,
Brilliant.
select what they are. But I had these fitted a very long time ago, and I don't know what I did wrong. I think that maybe when I was getting them fitted, I was tense with my jaw, or I didn't hold my ears how I should have done. And if I have them in and I'm singing, they come loose. I hear little moments of the audio. So they're not perfect, but they're great. But I've had those for a very, very long time. So if I was at a festival or a gig, or even just some normal places, I'd have these in, because what they don't do, they're not like the ones you'd get from B&Q that just dumb everything down, all the top end. I can sit and talk to you. You know this, and a lot of people know this. I can sit and talk to you with these in, and it's a level. But then if there's a really loud noise, it just attenuates it down. And that's their genius. They don't just dumb it all down. Are they horribly uncomfortable? Yes. Do they sort of separate you from the feeling of the concert? Yes. But it's a way up. You can't have everything. And these have been the best things that I found. I have, alongside the big headphones that I was speaking about earlier, I have been speaking to a company who I won't mention, but you know who I mean, who about some IEMs, some in-ear monitors, so ones like that, but with a little amp in, because I'm interested in what happens if I have molded headphones that I can listen to quietly, so that I have sort of I'm not into noise cancelling headphones, things like that, but the idea of having those and a lower volume, I think would suit my ears well. So I'm going to look into that. I think that'll be interesting.
That's brilliant, Jim. Brilliant. Yeah, absolutely. I had some fitted the other day. I had some new ones put in, Pro 26s they were called, and I used them on a gig the other night with Dick Taylor and his band, and it was like, it worked really well. They were beautifully made, and that's the trouble, isn't it? Exactly, is if it's not beautifully cut or made after the event of having the mold, or you've maybe moved or something's happened during the molding process. You're right, because my jaw is ever so slightly out of line. I know you've had issues with your jaw. Did you say you had something like an unbelievably small mouth or something?
I've got a really high, whatever that's called, deviated septum. Just means I've got a bent nose, and that's really high. But yeah, I'm just a mess all over. Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. If you don't have the right kind of fitting, then yeah, when you open that, or if you're doing a drum fill, and you're invariably doing that. Yeah, with a bad fitting one. Yeah, these ones are great. Okay. I mean, sorry, Jim. No, I was just going to
say, it is lovely to see that a lot of people, and this sounds a little bit elitist, but when people make the next step up, let's say they've been gigging for a while and they've maybe signed a deal and they're starting to do a lot more gigs, I'm seeing most people now with in-ear monitors. Very rarely do you see people with, ginormous wedges and side fills these days. The younger people, I mean, people that are sort of 20, 25 and coming up now, they all seem to have IEMs, which is great, which is how it should be. Because the other wonderful benefit is if you've got a great in-ear monitor engineer, every venue you go to is the same. You can play at the Hollywood Bowl or your local dive, and it's going to sound the same. And that's a wonderful thing. To know that every night you're going to have the same sound. That's so comforting. I love the idea of that. And you don't have to worry about, this wedge not working and, the bass player's now stood in the way of my side fill. It's a great thing. It's nice to see them being used, I think.
Absolutely. And I noticed that the college, the one on the island, the Platform One College, which is great, they're making sure that they use a professional fitting company. Like I think they are using ACS and on the ear protection. And I think for every music college now, that's so important. Yeah. I mean, I wish I'd have had something like that in the early days. I really do, because I had to learn the hard way. I didn't know anything about ear protection. I really had no idea. And nobody told me what I should do when I was at the gig. So the etiquette was just to kind of keep your mouth shut and enjoy the ride, really. I didn't realize, that monitor's a bit too close to my ear. I need to ask them to turn the sound down. What always happened was that it's not anybody's fault, but it would generally be like a singer or a guitar player would be turning it up, but that's only because the drums would be really loud. We're all having it a bit louder. Yeah. I didn't know anything about it. I was so ignorant. I really had no idea. I was just so ignorant, Jim. Coming back to, lastly, I've got two more questions, if that's
sure.
Okay. And that's just something about, you kind of touched on it, but I wanted to kind of get more of an in-depth view on how you view spikes. So
spikes in what sense?
Well, when your tinnitus would say like markedly gets a little bit worse. So, or you come away from a session or something's happened and it's got more elevated. I mean, what happens to you? How do you kind of deal with that? And do they last long, these occasions?
I mean, the short answer is that they don't last a massive amount of time, which is lucky. That's really good. Right. But I have these, and I'm sure a lot of people get these. I have these odd spikes out of nowhere. They're the worst. So I can be stood in the middle of a field on my own and I would get a big thing that just goes through out of nowhere. Nothing was happening. Nothing, I wasn't walking, I wasn't anything. And they're the worst ones. They stop me dead in my tracks. And then what I've learned to do over the years, whether it's something like that or it's after a session, is I find comfort in almost analysing cause and effect of it. So if I've got bad tinnitus or it's really raised for some reason, I like to go, okay, Jim, well, the reason that's raised is because yesterday you spent too long by that bass amp, or you did this, blah, blah, blah. And I just make a mental, there's something calming about that for me. Just being able to go, right, well, okay, well, that's what it is. You know what, you're a silly boy, blah, blah, and move on. But I think as far as what do I do on each time it happens, it's very much like what I said earlier. I've put together like a toolkit of things that help me, and it's very insular and selfish. It's not anything to do with anyone else. I don't think it'd even help anyone else. It's just that I've learned a particular mindset that is that works for me. And we've talked about the confidence of not being sort of scared of it. All of these things, they all add up so that when I have got a spike, it just dissipates quicker. If I came away from a session and I went home and it's loud and I sat there in the quiet and really, you know, shut my eyes and analyze the sound, that doesn't help me. All I'll do is go deeper into the sound, and it'll get louder. And for me, it's not a case of distracting myself. It's just a case of going, okay, well, you know why that happened, and let's go about our day and see if we can. And that's the truth of it. I don't have any clever methods apart from the ones I've already mentioned. Noises that I like, noises that I found calming. But I found with all of this hearing stuff, apart from physical things, for example, I can move my jaw in a really extreme way and it increases my tinnitus. You know, it makes the whine worse. But outside of things like that, as long as I know where it's come from and I know that I'm doing something about it, I can be calm quickly, and it seems to move on. That's the truth of it.
Fantastic.
That's not great for everyone to hear, but that's my truth, is that I've worked for a long time on my mental health in particular, and the way that I consider certain problems, and especially health related problems in my life. And for me, it's just a case of, it's not anything as simple as manning up. It's not that at all. It's just being confident enough in my own psyche to go, okay, well, you know what happened, let's move on now. And if it happens again, we'll deal with it again. And when it happens again, we'll deal with it again. And we'll just keep going forward, because what's the other option? Lay on the floor in a ball. It's not how it's going to work for me. It just, you know, and also it sounds insane, but quite often if I have a spike from a session, I'm into another session the next day. And then it might have one after that, and I'm into one the other. I don't have the luxury of silence to sit around and wait for it to get better, listen for it to get quieter. I'm generally back into the noisy snake pit. I don't know if I answered that then, but I felt like I said something.
You have. It's exactly how I feel myself, Jim. It's exactly it. I might give it an evening. Mm-hmm. I might give it a morning, you know, if it's lucky enough to be given a morning. But yeah, I just get on with it and get straight on with the day and what I have to do. I'll use the sound as a way to actually work with it anyhow. So yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, it sounds a bit perverse, and again, I use that word, but I've been trying to create spikes. So I've been deliberately experimenting on myself recently, which is just to drum without the earplugs in my house. And so I know, like you were saying, you know, I know the noise exposure isn't too much, and I know the amount of time isn't too much. I know that it's creating tinnitus, but what I'm trying to do is to work on the plasticity that I feel. So the idea that I can go back to the sound therapy and try and change that sound and experiment on myself and try and see how I can make it work and take it as an energy and get a feeling for it and work within it. And the idea is also, you know, is really testing my perception and my reaction to it. And exactly what you're saying, it's like, if I give it lots of attention, then it could be absolutely horrendous, but it doesn't get that much attention, and I don't show it any love. It's quite the opposite.
Well, this is it. It's all about the role you take within the attention you give it. You know, if you take on the role of the victim in it, it's only going to be stronger. If you take it on as some kind of, you know, boss, some analytical boss, you know, some Columbo of tinnitus, like you're doing there, you're gaining a power over it. You're going, okay, well, you're kind of frightening, but you know what? I'm not scared enough that I'm not going to experiment with you and find out what my limits are. So let's see, let's dance. What you got? And it's just such a fantastic way of thinking about it, I think. And what you were saying there is a lot like what I do, in that I like to split stuff into bits. I like to understand what it is, and as soon as I understand it, I'm happier to deal with it. I've always been the same. If you break my leg, I'm fine. All right, it's painful, it's fine. But if I've got a slight stomach ache, I'll worry about it for days. You know, it's the stuff I don't understand, I don't like, and I know that. So when it comes to anything like this, the more I understand about it and the more I've bettered it and won, the more little victories I've had over it, then the better I'm doing in the war, you know, is the truth.
That's wonderful, Jim. You got a superb attitude. I think that's super. I've got a last question for you, Jim.
Sure.
Which is kind of it's lastly a hypothetically speaking question. Okay, so if I were to ask you to kindly unpack your tinnitus toolbox, what would be in it?
Okay, so first of all, there would be, if I rank them in the most important order, okay, which I would say the first thing is just a note. Do you know what? A post-it note that just says "Fear is a liar." That's my number one. That's what I need first, because I really do genuinely feel that for me, my mental state and how I consider tinnitus is the most important thing. That's the most powerful thing. So that. Outside of that, I'll keep a small booklet of all of my little victories. It's nice to remember them, whether it's virtual or, you know, it's nice to be able to flick through them. And then right at the very, I'd have these things, but maybe ones that fit better. And then at the very bottom, I just have my little list of comforting noise. That's it. But it's basically, I need a sheet of paper with a list on it, and it's just very simple things, and none of them are clever. None of them are complex or contrived. It's very simple. These 5 sounds or these 5 environments mean that I don't hear my tinnitus, ergo I like to be in them. Cool, that's a big one. You know, it's that. I think that the less you can get ready, the less you can have in your toolkit, the better. You know, I would probably be comfortable to go into battle with just the post-it note, is the truth. And the rest of it I'll take or leave.
Fantastic. Jim, thank you ever so much for being a super guest.
A pleasure. It's a pleasure.
So much for your time, Jim.
No problem at all.
If people would like to get in touch with you, like with the music in the studio and with the production, you know,
yes,
we will have producers and artists watching this.
Sure.
Where could they get in touch with you? What are your details?
Well, so the studio is called Empire Sound. Although we're still kind of building it, but I haven't pointed the camera at those bits. So there's a website for that, and then we work under the name Boe Weaver, and there's a website for that, boweaver.com, and then on Instagram and all of that stuff. And we don't have anything important to say, so don't expect anything clever, but there's nice pictures.
That's brilliant, Jim. Well, thank you ever so much.
Thank you, Rupert. It's lovely to talk to you.
You can find us on www.t-minus.info. On Instagram, we're tinnitus minus. We're on Twitter, Facebook. We have a T-minus tinnitus wellness support group. And thanks ever so much, Jim. Thank you very, very much. And we'll touch base with you in a minute and have a lovely little debrief.
My pleasure.
You ever so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye, everyone.